Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host, Dan, and as always, I'm joined by James. James, how are you doing this morning? You well?
I am well. It's very early when we're recording this, and I'm adjusting to that. I don't normally speak this early on a Saturday morning, but that's okay.
Yeah, a quick peek behind the curtain. Normally, we kind of record after work midweek, but we're doing this bright and early on a Saturday morning. I've never seen your room in daylight, James, but
There is, in fact, a window, yeah. It's a new feature.
God. I love that for you. Cool. But yeah, we have an awesome episode for everyone today. Today, we're going to be talking about what is the best size for a cube. This might seem like quite a simple topic, but it is one of the first things you have to think about when you're putting a cube together. And it really is, like, along with power, it is one of the most important things that will actually affect the cube. In terms of how it plays, how it feels, like how many people you can cube with. These are all things that are affected by this decision. So there also isn't a right or a wrong answer. So what we're going to be doing today is going over kind of like all the things that you have to consider. So basically to give you the tools you need to make the decision that's best for you and your cube group. So I think let's start off with kind of like the minimum size of a cube is every player you are cubing with getting 3 packs of 15. That's kind of like the bare minimum that we have to hit. So normally, the most optimal size of a draft is 8 players, mainly because you can work out pairings with that very easily. Kind of like you can either start randomizing or playing across pod, and then everyone plays someone with the same record. And at the end of that, you get a nice clean winner after 3 rounds with only one person going 3-0. It's why they do it in stores. It's why they do it at competitive level. It's a nice, clean number. So with that scenario, each player needs 45 cards, meaning for a standard draft, 45 times 8 players is 360. So to get a cube aimed at 8 players, 360 cards is the smallest number you can normally go for. And that's primarily the number that we'll be using as our smallest cube number. That's like our base level. But this does work with any size of pod. You just need to adjust your numbers up and down. So for like, when we talk about like 4-player cubes, the math, as it were, is 45 times 4, so 180 cards. So if you're looking at building a 4-player cube, adjust the numbers up or down, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And also, if you're building a cube to play with a specific group of people, if you're like, yeah, this is the 6 people I always draft with, we team draft or whatever, and bounce it around 6 people. You know, there's no rules here. Let's tailor it for your actual play group. If you are basically going to be playing with the same group of people every time. Yeah,
exactly. It's just basically if we say because 360 is kind of the shorthand for us for the smallest group. Basically, if we say that number, think of that as like that is like where every card is being drafted. That's kind of like the entry level for it. So we just wanted to get that out of the way at the start. But kind of like, let's actually start with the benefits of a smaller cube. And also worth mentioning as a little spoiler, some of these benefits will actually be negatives, which we'll get onto in a moment. But kind of, James, for you, what are some benefits of a smaller cube? Like a cube where it's the smallest number of cards possible, where you are drafting every card.
So I think the number of cards in your cube is something you can set as you set off on your cube design journey, right? But you can also sort of audible a little bit, right? So I think one thing is if you feel like you're adding a lot of filler cards just to sort of make numbers to get up to that 540 mark, for example, which is often seen as the default, then maybe that's a time where you with that specific cube you're building, it's like actually building a 360 lets me have all cards that I am excited to have in the cube. I don't need to add a bunch of filler cards to get to a 540. So keeping it to just cards you're excited about, I guess, it is one really, really clear benefit if that applies to your cube. Often you will have 540 cards for your psych to put in the cube, in which case scale it up to a 540. But I think that is a sort of knob you can turn to optimize a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. As a entry point, starting with the smallest number of cards possible is definitely like smaller cubes are definitely easier to put together for a number of reasons. Basically, there's less cards, there's less kind of like interactions and synergies and kind of like decks you have to kind of worry about. You can kind of just get your 10 archetypes in there nice and easily. So it is a easier cube to put together, but it's also a cheaper cube to put together. Having less cards shockingly, means it's less expensive because you have to physically buy less Magic cards. But it's not just the cards; it's also things like you need less sleeves. James, you've resleeved your cube recently. It's not the cheapest of things, is it?
Yeah, no, it's kind of disgusting actually. I'm keeping my LGS in good business, buying tremendous amounts of Track and Shield. But yeah, no, but it's for sleeves. It's for physical cards themselves. Even if you're getting proxies, right? Like good quality proxies aren't free, and it also just makes it way more transportable if it's smaller.
Yes, well, the box as well. Like most of my cubes now come in 2 boxes. I have a box for lands and a box for the cube itself. But like, if I had a smaller cube, I could probably fit everything nice and neatly in one box. These are things that kind of like these are kind of like just added costs you have to consider as you start going up in size and that kind of stuff. And like just finding a box for like a super large cube, like a 720 cube, like I've seen people like get them like custom made. And when you're starting getting like custom wood boxes made, you're in the hundreds rather than like the 10s and 20s. Like a fat pack box will no longer do basically for a larger cube.
Yeah, for sure. And also, right, the it just lets you take it places that you wouldn't if it's a lot more if it's a bit more compact, right? I drafted my 180 card Ornithopter cube, fired up a Winston draft on a train recently. It was great. You can't do that with a 540 realistically.
No, I understand. Yeah, portability is something that I am becoming more and more of a fan for. I mean, it's probably like, this is a segue, but kind of like it's one reason why Dan's become very popular. Is like it's not just the interaction; it is the form factor as well, which is nice. But yeah, some other things with smaller cubes is that because there is a smaller card pool, you are quicker to find out like problem interactions. Kind of like, because you're drafting every card, you will see everything that you're testing. Like, I've had some cards in my 540 cube that just because of randomization haven't been seen in like the 3 drafts we've done of them. So I have no idea from a test point of view how good those cards are. But in a 360 cube, you will get guaranteed data immediately because you know it's going to get drafted. That is something that kind of like, as cube designers, is very helpful information, and just being able to guarantee that data is quite nice.
Yeah, for sure. And it lets you iterate quite quickly, right? If you're getting that instant feedback on all the cards you put in.
Exactly. And I guess probably the main thing actually with smaller cubes, they're kind of like, if you've listened to one of our set reviews, this would be part of the thing that I rattle off at the start every time. But smaller cubes are generally speaking more powerful. This is something James kind of touched on in terms of like, you don't have to really add any filler cards, but it just means that basically it's more condensed. Because there are less spots in there, you're more likely to be running the most efficient version. It's kind of like in a larger cube, you might run like redundancy of effects because you need them to scale up the size of the cube. But like if you only have room for like 3 bits of white interaction in your smaller cube, you're going to run swords, path, and like a 2-mana variant. There isn't going to be like you're not going to be hitting like the 4th or 5th version of that effect. You're just running the best version of that effect. So normally in a 360 cube, in a smaller cube, you are getting all the powerful cards. And because also every card is being drafted, it means that nothing's being left in the box. It means that people's decks generally are stronger in a 360 cube as well, because every card is being opened, and all those cards in theory are a higher level because you're more likely to pick the best version of that effect for your cube to get in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. And it's you get less filler, and you can make decisions about more narrow interactions that you can seed into your cube, right? You can put in plants which are good with 1 or 2 other cards, and you're not worried about that card being dead because the other part is not opened. So obviously, like, this is sort of clearest with like narrow 2-card combos, right? Like Thopter Sword. If you put Thopter Foundry in, then Sword of Vermeek will also be opened, whereas Thopter Foundry is a pretty dead card when Sword isn't opened. I think there are upsides and downsides to that, but it is it does mean you don't have dead cards in the draft.
100%. Like, I think for me, probably the best example of that is Dark Depths. Like, Dark Depths is so much better in a 360 cube, where you know, one, that Dark Depths is going to be open because there's only one of that effect, and you know that Thespian stage or your Vampire Hexmage, you know is going to get opened. Whereas like in a larger cube where you're not opening every card, you might draft the Thespian stage or the Vampire Hexmage, and just like the one card payoff just might not be opened. In a 360 cube, you are guaranteed to open both halves of that combo, and the only difference in that is like someone else might draft it, but like you have that, but at least you know it's going to be in the pool when you're making your decision to take one of those cards.
Yeah, for sure. It adds. I think there's positives and negatives to that, right? But it adds that element of predictability, I think, in the draft.
Exactly, which I think kind of leads us on to the negatives of a smaller cube. And it's like the main one for me is less variety in both the draft and in the gameplay, because every card is being opened. As we said, what we just talked about knowing every card's going to get opened is a positive and a negative. It means that you will often see similar decks because if everyone kind of gets into their archetypes, there's no really variety in the deck. It's more just kind of like who got the lightning bolt and the red X deck, that kind of thing. That's kind of like the main variance. But kind of like I know from like 360 cubes that kind of we've drafted in the past, kind of like it was a few years ago, but like knowing that kind of like the combo deck was always going to get all its pieces meant that it was generally stronger. It's not really fighting for bits and much. It's basically like this was in like a powered cube we were doing a few years ago, but like Kiki Jiki's Mention was one of the best decks in the cube because people knew it was going to be opened all the time and every piece is so you could take Kiki Jiki early and you knew you were going to get the deck together basically.
Yeah, I think this is my main issue with cubes where you draft every card in general, because to me a lot of what makes draft fun, right, is that I'm playing with the possibilities of things I can see in the future, right? And I'm trying to balance the probabilities that I get all these pieces, and I'm trying to plan for that, but nothing is guaranteed. And I always have imperfect resource and imperfect information about what my deck is going to end up looking like. And when all the cards are being drafted, especially when a lot of the cards are very contextual, they work only in certain contexts with certain other cards, it kind of does start to feel a little bit deterministic, really, sometimes. So I think the Dark Depths example is pretty good, right? Like, so let's say we're in pack 1. I have Dark Depths in my opening pack. I don't take it. I take something else. Dark Depths comes back, right? I take the Dark Depths. Thespian stage is now basically in my pool because everyone else has seen the Dark Depths. They haven't taken it, so they probably don't have the stage. So the stage hasn't been opened this pack. They know Dark Depths is gone, so they have zero reason to take a stage in future. I'm like basically a lock to see that Thespian stage, which is fine. But to me, that's kind of less fun than if I have to balance the possibility that I do or don't see a Thespian stage. It makes it, it just adds that element of predictability. And that's like obviously a very like narrow on the nose example, but there's especially when you have like big like sweeping synergistic archetypes, if you're the only person in the artifacts deck and you know that after pack 1, you kind of know what your deck is going to be at the end, right? Like to within a reasonable degree of certainty. Like obviously there will be some cards which everyone wants that you may or may not get. But for the core synergy pieces for your deck, you know what is going to be in your deck. And you don't really have to plan for like, oh, maybe I get the pieces to support this, maybe I don't. Should I take this more narrow card or this more generally good card? You're just like, no, I know I'm going to get there. Like, I don't have the pieces yet, but I know that no one else wants them, so I will get them because they will be opened. I like it when I have to make judgment calls about what I think I might get down the road in the draft. To me, it is less fun when I sort of know what I'm going to get.
No, definitely. I would definitely say that I'm in the same camp as you, but I do think that is still a that is a preference of us. It's not like we're not saying it is a fact that 360 cubes, the gameplay experience is worse, because I think that's just our opinion of it. Like we both like the variety with the draft, and also we are fortunate enough to draft fairly regularly. I think if you are in a play group where you might be drafting a cube like once a month or once every 3 months or something like that, having a small cube where the changes to the cube are you make updates every time rather than the variety in what is opened, I think it's still perfectly fine. Like, I think, again, it is up for you, dear listener, to work out if you are making a cube, what is what like is the cost savings, is like the time of putting it together, is that worth the flip side of, well, one, actually having a more powerful cube, but two, just seeing the same gameplay every time, or the same kind of decks every time. Like again, this is for you to decide. We are presenting the facts to you and giving our opinions on it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually. I think, honestly, this concern almost doesn't apply for the first sort of 5 to 10 drafts you do with a cube, because in that phase, you're all still working out what the good decks look like, right? You're still working out where all the pieces fit. Assuming, I say the first 5, 10 drafts of a cube, assuming it's not very similar to cubes you've drafted before. But I think, like, long term, it does kind of have a replayability for me.
Exactly, and but there are some like for your main cube, I do agree with kind of like with where we are on it. But like for like a second cube or for a more gimmicky cube, I think like there are actual benefits of it being every card being drafted. Like all the 4-player cubes that we do, like your Unorthodox cube, James. Those are cubes where every card is being drafted, and that's by design. And like for those kind of cubes, I think I actually like that a little bit more, because it is like the form factor of it being 180 cards means it does fit into a long box with lands and stuff. That is quite nice. And like, because in theory we're not doing those as often, having every card being drafted, I do quite like for those. So for cubes with 4 players, I think drafting every card is actually I think I like it more in those scenarios than a bigger one. And also for cubes where kind of like it's more like I'm going to use the word gimmick here, but like I mean like if your cube is built around a certain thing, kind of like a desert cube, for example, where like you have to draft your lands. In those scenarios, I think drafting every card is probably a benefit, because you can control the environment and you know that you're going to be able to get across the gimmick or like the point of the cube. Like half the things isn't going to be like half your kind of cool interactions aren't going to be left in the box. You know that the players are going to get the exact design experience that you've made for them. So for those cubes, I think drafting every card is definitely a benefit as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with those cubes, you're generally less likely to be like 20 drafts deep into the cube at any point, right?
Exactly.
So the replayability thing doesn't hurt as much. I was like, with the 4-player cube, the other reason why I made the mini version of the Ornithopter cube 180 was that I want to be able to Winston draft it with 2 players.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And that gets a bit tough if it's much bigger than 180, right? Because then you're just seeing such a small amount of the cards that the combos mostly aren't going to work.
Nice. Cool, yeah. So I think we've kind of touched on small cubes. Let's move on to larger cubes. So we'll kind of go into more specifics in a bit, but by larger cubes, we are referring to a draft environment where some of the cube is left in the box. We'll go over specific numbers in a minute, but like specifically here, we're being like, it could be a quarter of the cube left in the box. It could be half the cube. It could be a whole extra size again. But it's by larger cube, we just mean that you are not drafting every card in the cube. Some is being left out. So what are the benefits of this? So James, you want to talk about so we have a bigger cube. How does that affect the variety? If in a smaller cube we have less variety because every card is being opened, how a bigger pool of cards is going to have more variety. Talk to me about that, James.
Yeah, for sure. You end up with more variety in where the decks end up because you just have more variety of cards. Like, if you take, for example, say like a powered cube, like a like Mitgo Vintage Cube adjacent type cube, right? If you were to build a 360 version of that, you have so few flex slots, right? It's kind of unreal. Unless you want to sort of start cutting some of the really powerful cards because you don't like the play experience. If you're just building the powerful cards, then you basically don't really have many decisions as a cube designer, because there are just so many uncuttable cards really in that cube. Whereas beefing it up to 540 gives you some space to try new cards, and it gives you some space to like experiment with new packages, which then add more replayability to the cube down the line, right? Because if you just build for 360 with the powerful cards, then that's really not going to change very often. It'll change when, I don't know, they release a Modern Horizons set. But outside of that, you're going to be putting in like 1 to 2 cards each set, and a bunch of them will end up getting cut, and you'll just end up with the very similar core gameplay experience. And because all these cards are getting drafted, that will at some point, I think, become a little bit repetitive. Whereas greater variety of cards, greater variance within the draft, right, of what you're going to see, and you just end up with decks which are less powerful, but I think a greater range, which is I think really the key in a lot of ways to building a cube which has longevity. I think often we talk about cubes as in like, oh, they're fun or they're not. I think there's a really different thing between building a cube that is fun for 5 drafts and a cube that is fun for 20 drafts. And I'm not saying that like it's not worth your time to build a cube that's fun for 5 drafts, because you got 5 drafts worth of fun out of it, and that's great. Like, I've definitely built cubes where I'm not going to be, I'm not planning to be drafting it, every couple of weeks for ages. But if that is your goal, I think it asks slightly different things of you than if you're just planning to draft it a few times. You really need that replayability, so you need the variety.
No, definitely, and yeah, I completely agree with that. The variety for me, I really love about larger cubes, and also part of where that variety comes from isn't just that you're not opening every card, but yeah, you have more room, you have more space to try things. But like at a base level, that comes on your basic effects. Like in a larger cube, you are less tied to running the most optimal version of a card, because you probably already have like the most optimal versions of cards in certain slots. So let's talk about burn. Like we generally talk about this in set reviews and stuff, but like generally in a larger cube, you'll run like lightning bolt, burst lightning, chain lightning, and then after that you have like probably the need for 2 more slots. After the most efficient ones, you can start running ones that synergize with things that your deck is doing. So like I talk about this like a bunch in the set reviews, but kind of like in my cube I have artifacts. I run Pyrite Spellbomb as my 3rd or 4th bit of burn. It's an effect that a red deck will want, but it has additional synergy in the artifact deck. In a larger cube, you can do this for basically so that there are so many additional slots that you can do this for. Like you can like tie like any kind of staple, like your ramp in green. If you have enchantments, you can swap some over to be on like wild growth effects. There's plenty more slots where you can really tailor this and just kind of like by dropping the raw power level, and you add synergy, which makes more interesting decks. And that's easier to do in a larger cube because you can still run the Swords to Plowshares, but you can run the synergistic version of that as well. Like you can run the Oblivion Ring to go with your Enchantress deck as well. You don't have to make the hard choice. You can run both, and that's really nice because like there is a bit of Timmy in all of us. Doing A plus B equals cool thing is people still like doing that, no matter how much of a gamer they are. That is still something other people like. So it just gives you larger cubes gives players more opportunity to find the cool interaction that you can kind of seed in there because you have more slots.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also kind of nice, right, that sometimes the interactions don't come up every draft. It means people discover things slowly, right? They're like, oh, that card and that card, I hadn't thought of that. Whereas if it's a minimum size cube, everything's sort of discovered right away because we see all the cards every draft.
Definitely, and that actually kind of brings us on to another thing that's quite nice, is that larger cubes are more forgiving of power level because you're not opening every card. Or in a cube where you're opening every card, the power level is there. It's guaranteed. Like if one deck is more powerful than another deck, it's going to be seen because every card is being opened. In a larger cube, bits of decks might be left in the like the aggro deck might not get that gut or broadside bombardiers, or like the Gruul deck might not get the Minskaboo because it wasn't opened. There is this like a kind of like averaging effect. It kind of like smooths out the peaks and the troughs because not every deck is the most optimal version. Kind of like in a larger cube, and like every deck is like is not 100% because all its cards weren't opened, or doesn't have the potential to be 100%. It's like the ceiling for every deck is slightly lower. So I find that does kind of even things out quite nicely. It means that kind of like as a play environment, it is more forgiving for players not having to have the most optimal version of a deck. I've generally found anyway.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a bit more forgiving of power outliers, right? Because the first time someone kills you with a broadside bombardiers, you can actually do some pretty sweet things with that card. Like, it's like, oh, that was cool. You did the thing. Congratulations. We'll move on. The 10th time it happens, it's getting kind of boring,
Yeah.
And if it's not opened every draft, it just spreads out that pain a little bit, and maybe you get to keep broadside bombardiers around for a little bit longer before your players start complaining about it, and you can move it to the sideboard.
And actually, talking about players, that's a nice little segue. One thing with larger cube is they fit more people. If you're doing a 360 cube or the smallest size of a cube, if another friend comes along, you can't fit them in because every card is being drafted. One of the things I do like about larger cubes is that you can fit more players in. Like with again, we will do harsh numbers in a minute, but like with a 540 cube, you can have up to 12 people. And I'm not saying that, like, I think we've done that maybe once or twice in like the 6 years I've had my cube together, but we've done plenty of like 9s and 10s. Like that does happen quite a bit. Not having to turn people away is something I personally quite like. And that's something that you can do with larger cubes. You have that flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. I remember organizing when cube drafts were being organized, and people had 360s. There was a thing where it was like, they'll invite these 8 people, and then when they can't come, they will invite more people because they don't want to just invite everyone, and then more people come and they have to say, no, you have to go away because we can only fit 8 people. So yeah, having that flexibility is pretty good. But I guess it is also worth thinking about, right? Like, how many people are you regularly gonna get? Because if you're regularly getting like more than the 6 people, and building a 540 might feel a bit too spread out, right? You run into the issues of your combos don't work because you're only seeing closer to like half the cube every time. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind. But yeah, I think generally, the more cards you have, the more flexibility you have. That's quite nice.
Yeah, and the last thing we want to touch on for benefits anyway was that with a larger cube, it is easier to make cuts and to make swaps. Like, think of it like Commander. Like, we've all been there with a pile of like 200 cards. We need to get into 100 cards. Imagine if we could make our Commander deck 50% bigger. That is something you can, and like, if I'm honest with you, that is probably the biggest reason why people have larger cubes. Like there are so many, like, there's a lot of kind of like logistical reasons and play pattern reasons, which should all be considered. But a lot of people will go for a larger cube because it's like, ooh, I get to add more cards. And we all like Magic cards, James. I do think that is a big part of people's reasoning for going for large cubes. Like, a benefit is you get to look at and you get to include and think about more cards. And as Magic players, that's something just like fundamentally I think we all generally like.
Yeah, for sure. Like, adding cards to your cube is really fun, and cutting cards isn't. Like, when we draft, we always chat about cards to add and remove from the cubes afterwards for a solid hour, right? And there's a lot more chat about cool cards to add than maybe we don't need this redundant piece of whatever, right? Because it's making cuts can be hard. Like, if you built your cube well, all the cards are in there for a reason, right? And I think that's maybe a topic we can go into on another episode. Is how you make those cuts, but if you have a bigger cube, you do just have a little bit more fat, right? But can be trimmed, and that's nice. You don't have to. It's not like every time you make a cut, you have to be cutting like some fundamental strategy that's available in your cube because it's all so tight. It's you can just cut some redundancy or whatever, and it's okay.
Yeah, 100%. Let's move on to some negatives of a larger cube, and like, I think it is one that kind of it does have to be considered, and that it is just more expensive. Like, if you have more cards, it means you have to buy more Magic cards. That is more expensive. You need more sleeves, and you need a bigger box. These are like, and also, yeah, and the form factor of having to carry it places. Like, I had to buy a separate bag to carry my cubes in because my normal rucksack didn't fit it. So when I bought a new bag, one consideration was like I took an empty cube box with me to the TK Maxx to see if it fit. These are things you have to consider, but yeah, cost is a real thing.
So all I see in TK Maxx is people trying to cram their cubes into
a cube bag.
Yeah, no, it is a real thing, and it's it can be a little inconvenient, and it means that you you can't just bring your cube with you on the off chance of people want to fire a draft, right? And it's I guess we discussed a lot of these with the positives as a smaller cube, but yeah, so the more cards you have, 2-card combos get worse. Whether that's an upside or a downside for you, I guess, is a point of call. But it especially the 2-card combos where there isn't redundancy, right?
Those are much harder.
So something like twin combo, there is redundancy on both pieces, right? So it's not as badly hit by this, right? Because you've got Splinter Twin and Kiki, and then you've got a bunch of you've got Exarch, Pestamite, and a bunch of other ones if you want them. But combos like, say, Thopter Sword, there is no other Thopter Foundry, and there's no other Sword of me, right?
Yeah. And then, like, same as a card like Devoted Druid. Like, I have only ever seen this be good in a 360 cube. Like, in a 360 cube, I've got like the Devoted Druid Infinite Mana combo off a couple of times. But in any cube bigger, I have just never got it off. I've never seen it. I've never even seen it work in a cube, basically, just because both players have to, like, you have to get both bits, and like, yeah, it's just never come up. Like, I think I Devoted Druid and the combo that turns it into a vehicle in my cube for like
Swift Tree config,
for like 2 years.
No one ever did it.
No one ever did it. So I just ended up cutting both bits because it's like, well, this is kind of pointless. And like, that is something that does, like, it's a 2-card combo with no redundancy. There isn't another Devoted Druid, and there isn't another target creature becomes a vehicle effect. There are kind of like other ways of comboing off with Devoted Druid, but they're all bad cards that you wouldn't run outside of Devoted, like outside of the combo. And just if it's never coming up, it's just kind of a bit frustrating. And that is something that does happen with larger cubes. Like those specific combos are just way worse. And like actually, real talk, James. When was the last time you saw someone make a Marital Age in any larger size cube?
Oh, I still jam it in Modo Cube times. Like, it's one of those combos for me in Modo Cube right now where, or certainly, actually, I didn't draft it much last season, but the season before I did some drafts, and I did draft that deck. And it's one of those combos where it's like, I'm not really spending picks on the cards. I'm not like spending a real pick to speculate on a Dark Depths, but if I'm doing the lands thing, I often get the Dark Depths for free. And then if I get the stage, I will run it because you have the ways to shoot for it, right?
That's fair. Yeah, they did go a bit harder on the lands deck in Vintage Cube recently. So maybe that's going to give it a bit of a resurgence. But I mean, just from my personal anecdote, I've not seen anyone do it in paper in any of our cubes in quite a while.
Yeah,
it's cool, fair. So it's staying in for now.
Yeah. I mean, it always has the issue, right, where you put in a bunch of effort and do your whole thing, and then they just have to exile your Marital Age, and you're quite sad. Yeah. The Druid one makes me sad. I had that in my Vintage Cube for ages, and in my head, it should still be good because I think Devoted Druid is still like a pretty decent card on its own.
Exactly.
Like it makes you 2 mana at some point. But I think the thing is that is just probably less true than it used to be. Like we're just a little bit less forgiving of 2 mana dorks now, right? That aren't like exactly Sylvan Caryatid because it can't die, or Fanatic of Vonas.
And they either make a bunch of mana or they make any color of mana. Just making a single green for 2 isn't as hot anymore. Some other things to consider, or some other negatives of a larger cube, is that it takes longer to get information on your tests. As I mentioned earlier, there are cards that I have not seen, that I've added like 3 or 4 drafts ago and have not seen just because a third of my cube isn't being opened. It does take longer to get, like I've had cards that have come in, been in for like 6 months and have come out with never being played because a better version has come out in like Modern Horizons or something like that. And it's like, that can be frustrating because it means you just don't get the information on terms of like how good a card is, or kind of like you can. Sometimes I can add a whole archetype, but that's probably just me being a bit more trigger happy with stuff. I like fiddling. I like mucking around with cubes, and like in a larger cube, you don't get that information. Partly because 1, it could not be opened, but also because 2, your drafters have other options.
Yeah, no, it's a very real thing. It's in a small cube, you just get instant feedback, and if the card goes last pick a few times, it's probably bad. Whereas in a larger cube, you don't really get that.
Exactly, and that could also not just be because the card is bad. Like in a larger cube, because there's also more archetypes. People just might not be in those archetypes, so that is a reason why it might not get open. But another thing, actually, a final one I thought of actually while we were recording is there is a thing of in larger cubes, it's less noticeable if you lose cards. In a like we had it recently with your 180 Ornithopter cube, where basically we knew at the start there was 181 cards in the pool. So at some point, a basic land had got in. So we just basically had the spare card in the middle. Whoever had the land in their pack could swap it out for that card. But that works the other way. If you are drafting every card, you know immediately if you are missing a card. I'll be honest with you. I'm assuming I have 540 cards in my large cube. I haven't counted it in like a year. At least it hasn't been a cut I've wanted to make. Like, you see what I mean? Kind of like if you lose a card in a cube where every card is being opened, you will know the next time you go to draft it that a card is missing, and you can start chasing that up. What I'm basically saying is I should count my cube at some point. That's the.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a positive for min-sized cubes because, like with the 180 card cube, I am pretty much 100% sure that the list is on Cube Cobra is exactly the same as the cards that are in the box. With my 540,
oh, you're not even.
I'm not really sure. Like I think it's mostly it, but
I wouldn't go that far. Like I know Cube Cobra is like that's a whole. When I do a cube update, it's a whole evening of like, okay, we have the pile here, we have the pile here, we have the laptop in the middle, the sleeves will interchange, and now we update Cube Cobra. But yeah,
I think this is actually a pretty big negative. Larger cubes in general is that the admin is harder.
There is a lot more admin. Yes.
Yeah.
You have a lot more things.
I'm really bad at the cube admin. I really enjoy making the list on Cube Cobra.
Yeah.
Translating that to the box is so much admin.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah. And it does get more complicated with larger cubes. And also in terms of just like there's more overlap in terms of decks and mechanics, and you have more room for stuff. But kind of like, let's actually kind of keep the ball rolling and talk about like kind of what sizes of cubes that you often see when it comes to larger cubes. Because obviously, like, again, we are going with this where 8 people is the norm. So we know that 360 is the minimum. Every card is being opened. The general sizes that you generally see, and like people can build anything within this realm, but kind of these are the most common because they kind of work in terms of like multiplying or multiple factors. So you often see 450s, which is 1.25 the size of a normal cube. So you have an additional 0.25 over the minimum. 540s is the next common. I think probably the most common. That's what the Mega Vintage Cube is. That's what a lot of people will build their cube as if they are going for that larger number. With that, that is 1.5 times the size of the smallest cube. So you have a whole extra third of your cube available to you. And then once you're going to go above 540, it is kind of like the Wild West in terms of what size you go for. But like generally, if you're going above 540, like the peak is normally 720, which is twice the size of a 360 cube. So you have double the amount of bits, or you have double the amount of minimum effects. And there are some things you need to consider if you're going above a 360, because it's not just you just get. If you're going from a 360 to a 540, you just don't get an extra 90 slots to just add whatever card you want. If every card if every card isn't being opened, you have to add redundancy to effects, and that's not just like I need an extra removal spell in black. It's like I need extra lands. I need to make sure like all of my all the pieces my two players need to see needs to be extended as well, and like that is still cool because you can still get more variety in those bits, but it's not just like I have 100 cards to add a whole extra archetype or I can add a bunch of packages. You still have to add your redundant effects to things. Like you have to make sure your staples are there, like your black removal, your blue counter magic, your green ramp, your lands, all that kind of stuff. You still have to add those bits as well when you update the size of the cube. So really, realistically, if you're going from a 360 to a 540, you probably get maybe like an extra. So if you're going up by like 180 cards, probably like 80 to 100 of those are staples, and the extra 100 is the cool bit, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. And I have seen cubes that go even bigger. I think once you get too much past that, it's in the crisp bit. It sort of starts to feel like a slightly more tuned version of like a chaos draft or something, right? Rather than a very curated cube, which is not a bad thing. Chaos drafts are really fun, but it's quite a different experience, I think, from a regular cube draft.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to have a build your own chaos draft, which I think how many cubes? I think it's just under 2,000 cards, but for that I do collated packs because it's just too big. You would get no predictability or draftability out of it. Like the curves would be wild, the color density of like who's in what color decks would be off the chain. So that is something I guess you have to consider if you're going like well above. Like I'm going to be honest here, we do not have that much experience with cubes that are above 1,000 cards, despite me having one. But like it's everything of like once you get like really really large, you will have to do things like pack correlation. Otherwise, it's just going to be a shit show. Basically, would be my gut.
And how do you shuffle 1,000 cards? Casino shuffle.
So I effectively have a long box. I have like it's like a shoebox that's kind of split into like two long boxes inside, and in that I have it set by color. So I will shuffle colors together and then make packs from that, because effectively mine's like a build mystery booster at home thing.
Yeah. No, it was very cool. It was definitely more effort than I would be willing to put in.
I'll be honest with you, I
enjoyed it every time we drafted it.
Yeah, I built that after I had surgery and couldn't do anything for 2 weeks. So I just spent 2 weeks on a spreadsheet.
Checks out.
The things we do for Cube. But yeah, some other things you also have to consider for larger cubes. Let's keep it. Is, as we discussed, things like payoffs for decks, things like combo pieces. It is like you have to look for those redundant effects, and it's why, James mentioned Kiki Jiki Splinter Twin because there's a redundancy on both parts, but it's also why people have really tried Persist combo for so long, despite the fact I never thought it got there. It is combo pieces where there are so much redundancy because you need a sacrifice outlet. There's a bunch of sacrifice outlets. You need persist creatures. There are some good playable ones, and you need ways of putting counters on things. There is redundancy on all of those pieces, so that's why people have really tried to get persist combos working. And like for some cubes, it will definitely work, but like in the ones that we've played it in, it hasn't really got there. But why it is still being tested is because every piece has enough redundancy that you can add it to a 540 cube, and you know it's going to get opened. So there is something to consider.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's not like the end of the world if you have some dead cards, and I think it's actually a good play pattern that players need to spec on stuff without the guarantee of getting paid off that, right? And it means you need to stay flexible in your draft because you don't know what cards you're going to see. And maybe I spec on this combo piece and it doesn't get there, and that's fine. And I'm sort of simultaneously I'm building two decks sometimes, almost, right? I'm building the deck where I get my other combo piece and I'm a combo deck, or I'm building the deck where I don't get my other combo piece and I'm some like mid-range deck.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's one of the bigger things I like about the draft experience of a larger cube, because if you're doing a cube where every card is being opened, taking that Splinter Twin is more like, it's not as much of a spec, it's more like planting your flag. Whereas in a larger cube, it is a spec because you don't know. Like in both scenarios, there's the option of someone might take the other bits. But in a larger cube, you also have the thing of the rest of it might not even be opened. So it does feel like in a smaller cube, it's like, I am, by me taking this, no one else will see this. So therefore, I get this now. No one else will have any signals that it's opened. So therefore, it is mine. It's more of a guarantee. Whereas in a larger cube, it is definitely something to be said, and this might be something that comes more for players who are more experienced with cubing, of just basically just not having an idea where you're going for longer. That is something that newer players will not like as much. There is something being said about like, oh, I've taken this combo piece pack in like early in pack one, and now I know my deck. That is something that is I would say is something that is more that newer players in Cube will find more, or will be drawn to more, because there's less stress there. There is definitely a thing of like, for more experienced players going into pack 2 or 3 and not really knowing what your deck is doing, like having a vague idea but not really kind of having like the payoff or the thing, like of really narrowing down what the deck is doing, is less of a thing for more experienced players. Would you agree with that, James?
Yeah, yes and no. I think it depends what sort of new players you're at, right? Like, because new players don't know when they see one half of the combo, they don't know that that's a flag they can plant, right? And they don't know what goes with that. And in some ways, it's a better experience for them if everyone is figuring it out as they go, because everyone has the uncertainty, than if the experienced players are able to plan out their whole draft and what their deck is going to look like from very early, whereas the new players are just sort of figuring it out and splashing around,
Is new to Cube a fairer way of putting it? Because I remember because I played Magic for many years before I started cubing, and kind of like I had heard like, okay, this Grizzlebrand card I've heard is good, that kind of thing. Is that fair? So like you already know, like you've done standard draft, you've played a bit of Pioneer, and then you start dipping your toe into Mitgo Cube and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it depends what your cube looks like and how sort of quote unquote obvious the combos and just like the cards that go together are, right? Like, it's really obvious that Griselbrand and Animate Dead will a powerful combination of cards, right? It might be less obvious to people, say, that like Displace a Kitten and Coveted Jewel cards we're trying to combo together, right? And yeah, like, I don't know, if you've not played with Flash before, then you might not see it might not be immediately obvious which creatures you want in your Flash deck. And I think it's good, actually, this is sort of a broader point in Cube side, I think it's good to have a few different packages that fit in different places on that spectrum, right? It's good to have some which hit you over the head and they're like, put this with this, it will do the thing.
Do this, yeah.
And it's good to have some which sort of take a bit of figuring out too.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so I think we are starting to round up the conversation. So kind of like everything we've kind of gone through before this is kind of like, we're basically trying to present the facts to you while having a discussion about them in terms of like benefits, yay or nay, in terms of larger cubes, smaller cubes. To an extent, it is up to you to make the decision on the size of the cube that you want. The last part, we are just going to give our opinions on it, because obviously, we have opinions. I mean, we have a podcast, obviously we have opinions. But like, all right, I'm going to give my opinions, James, and kind of then feel free to give yours. But like for me, I have two main cubes. I have my Unpowered Vintage and I have my Treat Yourself cube. Those are both 540s. I like larger cubes for the cubes that I draft regularly because for me, variety is important, and the ability to go up in size is nice. Like as I mentioned, we've only done like 1 or 2 12-person cubes, but we've done like going up or down from 8 is quite common. And I like not like all of our play group is people I like spending time with. They are my friends. I personally don't want to turn anyone away. So and it's nice as the organizer just be like, we just have a WhatsApp group and it's just like, who's in? Everyone says yes. I know, like if the world comes like where we go above 12, it's more likely I would add more cards to the cube at that point. I think, but like that is something that I do like about having a larger cube. In terms of my so for ones I do regularly, that is where I sit. I like 540. I think it is a nice balance of you get additional flex slots and not everything is open and it gives you that variety. I think that is nice. I do like smaller cubes for certain things though. Like I'm currently building like a pre-modern border cube that will be 450 because I still like the variety, but the card pool not being bigger is important because of pre-modern old bordered cards are now quite a bit more expensive. So I'm slowly putting that together, and like there is a world where it could be a 360, but I think the 450 is important because I like I still like the variety in the draft of not every card being open. So going to 450 is a nice kind of middle ground, I think, because there's still some of the cube not being open, so it's not a guarantee that you get the 2-card combo, but it's not as expensive as a 550, as a 540 or a 720 cube. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think my thoughts are pretty similar. For cubes that I am planning to draft a bunch of times, I don't really want them to be the minimum size because I want that element of unpredictability in the drafts is kind of the biggest thing. And then secondary to that, I like the freedom to add more cards and experiment a bit more, which is harder in a smaller cube. For cubes where I think we're probably not going to draft them as many times, and I just want to throw something together because I think it's cool, then I think minimum size is fine because I'm like, I want the cube to do this thing. I want this experience, and we're going to draft it like 5 times, and I think that'll be pretty fun. And the minimum size means it's easier to put together. I'm not as like invested in us continuing to draft it for ages, and we're sort of reliably going to create the gameplay experience I'm going for, I guess. And then when we get bored of it, whatever, that's fine.
No, I think that's fair, and I think as well, because obviously a lot of our conversation is based on like this is the size of your cube. It's set in stone. When reality, the size of a cube is not set in stone. You can add cards and you can cut cards. Like, especially if you're new to cubing, starting at a 360 to kind of get your like foot in the door is a great place to start. And then you can just add more cards. You can go up to the next level once you want that variety, once you're a bit more comfortable with the cube, with making cuts, making decisions, that kind of stuff. Like once your play group has kind of got a bit used to it, then you can add more cards. I would be a bit hesitant to kind of to do a thing of like every 6 months we're adding 100 cards, because that seems a bit. But like starting at 360 and then going up to 450, so you get the variety, and then maybe going up to 540 once you get the extra bit of comfortability, I think is a good place to go. But also, I could see like there is a world where at some point in the future I take my 540 and I downgrade it to a 450, because they're like dosing I think can be a good tool, or even just doing the process of what would I cut to get me down to a 450, or what would I cut to get me down, because that will actually show you the important parts, the important cards in your cube, even if you don't actually do it. Like I would like it's something I need to do at some point. I've just basically just work out what are the core cards in my cube, so I know what is the cuttable cards for later. I think can be quite an important thing, because it will quickly show you what is chaff and what is like, and like where things are unbalanced. So even if you don't actually make the cuts from your cube, still having in your head how you would downsize a cube can be a good tool to help balancing, basically.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then I think the final thing that's worth mentioning is we've talked entirely about cubes, which are sort of a round number of cards, right? How do you feel about the approach of just when I want to add some cards, I add some cards, and if it ends up being 476 cards, then that's the number of cards it is.
Uh, so as someone who, I've said my cubes are 540. My cubes are actually 543 and 551 because we have exactly done that.
Okay.
So both of mine have a thing where if you win a certain amount, you get to add cards. You've actually added 2 of the cards to my 540, James. So you're so in those respects, I am here for it. I think it's something you can do. Like, I would not do it at 360 because just having like 2 cards, like 361 is the worst size for a cube where just 1 card is being left out. I would not do that. I think that is like psychotic.
You get to the end of your dark depths, you just flip it and see the thespian stage. Yeah. That's really funny.
Exactly. I think that is psychotic. But I think at larger cubes, 100%. I also think at larger cubes, you need like, once you go above like 450, you can really do that. Like, and I know, like, I've seen plenty of people who, when they're testing cards, will just add the 20 cards they're testing. They won't cut anything. Like, that's perfectly fine as well. You don't have to be as basically. If I'm being honest, getting to the point of 540 is more hassle than getting to the point of 360 because you need more cards, because you need more sleeves, because it's more admin. But once you have it to that point, you have more flexibility in terms of like, I'm just going to like swapping cards out is easier. Adding like additional cards on top is easier. Like once you get to the larger point, I think you have more flexibility to do stuff like that and play about with it a bit more. When you're at 360, you are a bit more tied to a box of, I have to work in the realm of every card is being drafted. So you can't lose a card or add a card. You have to swap something in and out, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I think the main reason I keep mine to a round number is just I feel like when it drifts from that, I will have no remaining discipline and just add cards I think are cool, and it will end up being quite unbalanced, and I'll have more cards of certain colors than other colors, and yada yada yada.
You definitely still have to be disciplined, but like the ways that mine have got larger is more because it's like rewards for people winning because we've drafted the cube so much.
Yes, I think that's cool, and that's limited by never going to be a huge number, right? If you're adding 1 card when someone trios 5 drafts.
Yeah, for context, we've been drafting my cube for 6 years. There's been 3 cards added in that time. I think we are close to a couple more being, because obviously it takes time for people to get to 5 wins. But like in 6 years, 3 cards being added is quite a slow pace. But like, whereas my other one, the treat yourself, you get to just add a card if you win straight away. So we're up to like 551. So like that one at some point might have to like be checked, but it's more likely like the cards that are added will stay. I'll just cut other cards from the cube. Like that's like, it's less of a thing in larger cubes, but but yeah. And same with the testing of like, oh, here are 10 cards from Spider-Man I want to test. I'm not going to cut 10 cards because I can't be bothered. Like, I'm perfectly fine with that in a larger cube. I think it's actually a fine thing to do, of just like, I'm just going to add the test cards to the pile and I can take them out afterwards. I think that's fine.
That's also less admin. I might start doing that.
Yeah. It's like it's not like it gets trickier with like when it comes to like archetype changes. But like if it's just, here is a slightly more efficient white 3-drop, just add it and test it. Like you don't have to be like, and that is a benefit specifically for larger cubes. You can just do that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Marvelous. Right, I think that brings us to the end of our conversation. James, thank you for that. I thought that was a really good a good chat on something that is like quite fundamental, but there is actually quite a lot of depth and things to think about when you are putting your cube together. Because the size of cube along with power level is like the first thing you have to think about. So good for us to have a little chat on it.
Yeah, for sure. Always a pleasure.
Marvelous. All right, so that's going to do it for today. Thank you all very much for listening. Do give the podcast a 5-star review, a thumbs up, or whatever positive affirmation your podcasting platform of choice lets you do. Until next time, it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.